Good evening and welcome to another episode of What Now Irishman. My conversation partner today is a gentleman I've spoken to before, Mr. Gerard Banks, a fantastic Corkman. The last time I had him on, we spoke entirely about Terence McSweeney, and we'll actually put that link in to that old episode after when this goes out. We're going to be talking about something very, very different tonight. I'm going to bring him up here now. Gerard, welcome to the show again. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
So the conversation always starts, what now, Irishman?
So we're going to chat today about Marxism. We're going to get into depth about it, and a lot of people, when they talk about Marxism, they look at, let's say, they get into the Communist Manifesto, they get into Bolshevism in Russia and all of that. But it has a massive effect in Ireland, an incredible effect in Ireland. And there's a reason Marxist organizations have always wanted control of Ireland, and I'm going to get into depth with that. We'll talk about, let's say, Northern Ireland. We'll talk about Sinn Féin, kneecap, all of that. But I bring it back into a real-time understanding then of how you can change it and how you can have fun with changing it. And I'm here today as well to share a bit of a chess move, because I'm a normal Irishman too as well. I'm totally pissed off. The Free Palestine absolute nonsense that is driving us mental, all the woke absolute insanity. I'm going to explain all that to you in real time. What's the real reasoning behind it, and how you can weaponize it for our own good. I'm just going to keep it. I'm just going to speak open, and I don't give a hoot anymore in an honorable way, right?
I understand exactly what you're saying. So let's go back to the start. Okay. When did you start researching this? So I'm talking to you in relation to your recent Facebook posts, which are absolutely filled with knowledge. Right. There's no point in me trying to paraphrase it. I want you to explain where did this start in relation to your research, and where has it brought you now? And I know that's going to be a long monologue, but just fly away. Just keep going.
Fantastic. Thank you for asking me first and foremost, right? This is a really deep topic for me, and that's why when people ask me stuff, they say, Joe, you're really good at articulating what you're talking about, and you're really good at teaching people. And that's only because I've had most of my life to think about this, most of my life to argue all these points in my head. Even when it comes to Marxism, I grew up having these arguments with Marxists and stuff, So you might ask me, where did it all begin for me? It began with my nan. My nan, her name was Mary Tone, and her family was the family of Wolfe Tone. So I grew up from a very young age learning about Wolfe Tone and learning about the United Irishmen, right? And I'm going to show you something here. Everybody will understand this in Cork. This is the National Monument in Cork, right? Mm-hmm. So this would be the point. This would be where all the protests and stuff would begin in Cork, right? And not many people understand the teachings of this monument, and I'm going to get into it now. So this monument is known as the Spirit of Sovereignty. So in the center of the monument, many people don't notice, but that's Ériu. That's a statue depicting Ériu, the spirit of Ériu. So at the heart of the National Monument and the Grand Parade in Cork stands a powerful figure, Ériu, which is the symbolic embodiment of the sovereignty, the land, and the enduring spirit of the people of Ireland. So this symbolizes the enduring spirit of the people of Ireland. Ériu embodies the spirit of Éire as a sacred living force. So for a long time, this living force is something that captivated me from childhood, right? So in Irish mythology, the land itself was considered sovereign and sacred. Kings were legitimized only through spiritual union with her. Ériu was the guardian of Irish freedom, not just politically, but spiritually and culturally. So this symbolizes spirituality and culturally too as well. Like, I'm not saying that, like the embodiment of Ériu, so it symbolized the spirit of the people, if you know what I mean. So it was best through story format, right? So I understand when people talk about Christianity, is this a spiritual threat? No, it's not. No, it's not. It's in support of all of that, right? So placing Ériu at the center of the monument was deliberate. All sacrifices made in Ireland's fight for freedom was rooted in something more than politics. They are acts of devotion to the spirit of the land itself, right? So that you talk about the four guardians, and the four corners are known as the four spiritual guardians, right? Surrounding Ériu are four heroic figures representing the leaders from key Irish uprisings. 1798, Wolfe Tone and the United Irishmen. 1803, led by Robert Emmet. 1848, the Young Irelanders, led by Thomas Davis. And then you had the Fenian Uprising as well, right? So these figures act as spiritual guardians, symbolizing the courage of generations. They don't just guard Ériu, they serve as her protector, protect her sovereignty, and fight for her freedom. So as a young child, I come from the family of Wolfe Tone. So for me then, understanding the spiritual sovereignty from a very young age, I began asking, what is this sovereignty? What is this sovereignty? What is this, the spirit of the land? And if Wolfe Tone was seen as a guardian of sovereignty, then that's important to me. It's very important to me. That represents part of my family and my family heritage too as well. And I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into who exactly the United Irishmen are. I'm probably going to have a talk about this at Wolfe Tone's grave at one point and educate people on the reality of it all. That's a family grave of mine. And it's not just about Wolfe Tone at that grave. If people walk around and look at the other stones, I should do a documentary on that alone and educate you on who's who and what they all stood for. And because the United Irishmen opposed the Holy Roman Empire and wanted to unite Catholics and Protestants and unite Christianity against the empire, they were banished from being buried in any grave, right? So that was unconsecrated ground. It was a family farmyard, basically, right? So then, but to me, that adds to the beauty of it. Like, is it to be a true hero of Ireland to be banished from being buried in a graveyard? When you look at, let's say, you look at even the Holy Roman Empire, that was not Christian in any way. That was a control system, and I will explain that, right? But first, we're going to get into just the United Irishmen. Who were they? And then this will explain why I've been opposing Marxism from day one, right? So in 1798, the roots of Irish republicanism began in Paris. Wolfe Tone was chief the brigade of the French army and also served as adjutant general of the French Directory. So the French Directory was like the civil service in France, right? So Wolfe Tone was a main player in that system, right? It also became interesting later on in 1798 when, believe it or not, Napoleon took over Rome and the Vatican archives were then sent to the French Directory, which was Wolfe Tone, my family, right? So I grew up with access to different knowledge and different understandings, more so than most people, right? But the most important thing about Wolfe Tone and the heritage of Wolfe Tone, and this is what I bring, was the warning of Wolfe Tone. Wolfe Tone warned that a nation could only be free if its people remained sovereign, not absorbed into ideological systems that crushed the individual in the name of the collective. Wolfe Tone's legacy became a warning that communism and collectivism in the wrong hands just become tyrannies disguised as equality. And that's what we're facing today. That's what all the equality is about. It's tyranny disguised as equality, right? So truth be told, communism did not begin with Karl Marx, right? It began 50 years earlier in Paris with the conspiracy of equals led by Gracchus Babeuf. Gracchus Babeuf was the main founder of communism, not Karl Marx. Karl Marx was when the British Empire weaponized a lot, but there was a lot of intelligence services involved with Gracchus Babeuf too, and I'll get into that in a while. In 1796, it was Wolfe Tone as adjutant general of the French Directory who signed off on the arrests of the conspiracy of equals. They were arrested by Wolfe Tone because they were a threat to the freedom of humanity. In that defining moment, the fathers of Irish republicanism approved the arrest of the fathers of modern communism and radical proto-Marxism. Irish sovereignty was about Irish republicanism was bred from national sovereignty and the rights of a free people, opposing tyranny disguised as equality. Right? That's what the United Irishmen were. Right? So that's what republicanism is. There is no such thing as Republican socialism. There is no such thing. That is an intelligence service construct. And I'm going to get into that very proudly, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I've known this from a very young age, right? Again, I'm bred into the United Irishmen. It's part of who I am. It's like my nan from a young age was always telling me, you carry the blood of Wolfe Tone. So as I walked in town from childhood, passing the national monument, that got me thinking so much about, like, what is this sovereignty? What is the importance of it? And the importance of sovereignty is actually, sovereignty is your connection with the land, right? If you think of it, all indigenous people, their power and law rights come from their connection with the land, right? And if you think of it, we're told sovereignty is in court shouting and roaring about, I do not recognize this, that, the other. That's a psyop as well. True sovereignty is our connection with the land. And that's why all kings claim to be sovereign. They claim to be the person connected with the land. And if you think of it in Ireland, that's the one thing they've disconnected us all from, the land. Mm-hmm. The land is very important, right? So what is the main thing with Marxism, right? Marxism does not recognize property or land rights. So the Marxist Free Palestine movement is not fighting for the people of Palestine to get their land back from colonization. The Marxist Free Palestine movement is about ensuring Palestinian people never get their land back. It's the biggest scam of all time. The Marxist Free Palestine movement does not recognize individual or national sovereignty. Therefore, Marxist Free Palestine movement is not about individual human rights and sovereignty. It's about the removal of individual rights for the benefit of the collective. That's also how imperialism works. So it was imperialism that created communism, right? And to get people, to fool people to surrender their property rights, land rights, and all of that, right? Don't forget, this system was the very same system that was used by slaves in the cotton fields of colonization by the very same British Empire, who gave the land rights and individual sovereignty of the people of Palestine away through British mandate, otherwise known as the Balfour Declaration. Mm-hmm. So, like, think of it this way. Marxism is a direct threat to the sovereignty of Ireland, trying to disconnect us from our land. And that's in no way going to happen in my watch. It's not happening, right? And that's why I talk as well and communicate with all the indigenous tribal nations of the world, right? And you've seen how I communicate with all chiefs, everything. And when I was sitting down with them, I realized the one problem they all have that's robbing their land is Marxism, right? That's actually Marxism. That's what it does, right? Truth be told, the public knowing this part scares the shit out of the Marxism movement, because it's a scam. And it's also, I'm just going to read this and it'll explain a bit more to you, right? Because we've time, right? In 1948, both Israel and Palestine were colonized by Marxism, right? Many people don't know that, and it's hidden well, right? It was Marxism which displaced the Palestinian people of their lands and rights. The declaration of Marxism also, Israel was created by a socialist government in 1948, financed by Zionism. A great question to ask about now is, why would Zionism choose Marxism? Why would Zionism choose Marxism? Because Zionism is a people with no land and no rights, controlled by a government who doesn't have to care about them. That's what Zionism is. You're just a digital slave in a digital gulag, you know? The first president of Israel was a socialist named Ben Gurion, leader of the Labour Zionist Party. The Labour Zionist Party of Israel is connected then with the Labour Party of the UK through British mandate. Of course they are. And that's the Fabian Society. So they're the ones who pushed Marxism. And as you said, Marxism, you don't have property rights, you don't have individual rights. So what happens then? Empire takes your land the minute that you surrender all of that. And that's what happened to people of Palestine. And in Palestine as well, they were told, oh, you can't embrace your culture anymore because that's racist against the new people, the new plantations and stuff. It's the same as what's happening here. So what has happened for a while is they wanted you to believe that this is a propaganda machine. They want you to believe that Marxism is the only solution to colonization, when in fact true colonization happens with Marxism. I'm just going to keep going here because I don't want to, by creating a movement in Ireland fully opposing and looking to free the people of Palestine and free the people of Palestine from Marxism and socialism. It's like pulling a curtain at the end of The Wizard of Oz when you pull the curtain down to see who's behind it. The Marxist Free Palestine protests are like the golden egg of woke globalism. This would be a free Palestine. So I want to create Marxism, like a free Palestine from Marxism movement, right? And one of the reasons why I'm doing that is what Ireland and Palestine share in common now is colonization through Marxism. That's what we're suffering now at the moment. It's also the same as what all the indigenous tribal nations of the world are suffering, right? So the opposite to Marxism is sovereignty, right? So I'm only using the Free Palestine from Marxism as an education platform to teach everyone the importance of sovereignty. But truth be told, when people see it, they'll realize that I'm the one standing up for the rights of these people, not just these people everywhere. And we need to teach people in Ireland the importance of sovereignty and the importance of the whole lot. And I want to do, like, I know I can create a Free Palestine from Marxism movement, right? And be completely ideologically opposed to the slavery movement, the slavery of the Palestinian movement. And that's what that is. Like, I'm not even the biggest Palestine supporter. I just know this is how you free everybody and use it as an education platform to free people, you know? We now live in a world where indigenous people everywhere need to fully oppose Marxism. Marxism is the enemy of indigenous people everywhere, which pushes to remove their property and land rights as well as their individual and national rights, right? That's what it's about. You don't have property rights under Marxism, right? And it gets even more insane as well, right? Because if anyone who got the COVID jab, right, we now know that there was a Supreme Court ruling, right? A landmark case in 2013 in the US Supreme Court concerning whether human genes can be patented, right? So the Supreme Court unanimously ruled naturally occurring DNA cannot be patented. However, DNA which is created in a laboratory and does not occur naturally can be patented. So now all the people who got the COVID jab are now patented products. So they're actually products, so they don't have human rights. They're no longer human. So Marxism has fooled them to get rid of not just the property of their land and stuff, the property of their own body. They're now products owned by somebody, right? That's a problem. That's a problem, right? And it's important to explain it. So I'm just going to continue on here because I have a few things now to go through, right? So by running a Free Palestine from Marxism movement and educational platform, this totally exposed the scam and colonial purposes of Marxism. Fool people and nation to surrender their sovereignty and property rights to the imperial slave trade class who seek to take their lands and enslave their people. Marxism is the playbook used by George Soros and the NGO sector and also the World Economic Forum. This is how they push their woke Marxist agenda to remove us from our national sovereignty and individual rights. By organizing Free Palestine from Marxism protests, you basically pull the rug from under George Soros, the NGO sector, and the World Economic Forum. It becomes a direct challenge to the manipulation structures that they push for totalitarian control. A move like this is basically how you chase George Soros, Greta Thunberg, and the World Economic Forum away. How could we begin to even stop how could they begin to even stop a Free Palestine protest? Oh, imagine them out now trying to stop a Free Palestine protest. You know what I mean? This is the importance of it, right? No, they cannot be seen to be against the rights of the people of Palestine. And I want to be the man having that debate. I'll be dressed as United Irishman. 100%. You know, property rights, property rights is what's important. But I know I can hijack that whole platform. You know, they're all listening to me now. There's people messaging me going, I never knew. Because what they were doing is they were manipulating people through propaganda, right? How can they begin to even stop a Free Palestine protest when they base their whole manipulation around that very thing? An amazing debate and conversation would have to begin, and I would love to take part in that debate. Imagine having a Free Palestine from Marxism protest going in the opposite direction to the Free Palestine protest. You're starting down there, we're going to hit in the middle and we're going to have a great chat. That's when you get the cameras out. They cannot say openly that they're for the removal of property rights. Do you know what I mean? They're claiming to get the land back, but it's all about land, but it's complete manipulation. So this is a great way to completely expose all of that. And I'll just finish off this part here now, right? Marxism is the system that keeps colonization going, ensuring a people will never achieve property rights or individual sovereignty and rights, meaning they will never get their land back. This is a true scam. Freeing Palestine from Marxism is a movement that the colonized people and nations of the world could all get behind and teach the world truth that freedom is about sovereignty and land ownership and property ownership of yourself. right? You have to protect your own property too. You don't. So property is deeper than just land and stuff, right? And so is sovereignty, and that's why all the past generations of Ireland, that's what they stood for, and that's what they just made a statue of Ériu to embody that, so we've something to look at, right? So they want their land. The colonized people of the world want their land back. They want their sovereignty and culture back, everything that Marxism has taken from them, right? The Marxist Free Palestine movement is not a movement, it's psychological programming on a mass scale. It's a mass collective brainwashing to shepherd humanity towards a digital gulag of slavery. Freeing Palestine from Marxism is how you overwrite that program. It's how you begin to teach the world that true freedom, what true freedom and sovereignty is. The Marxist Free Palestine pantomime would have to try stop, but how could they? Like, what an amazing thing for them to come out and try stop. I want to see that and do it properly. And this could be done in the most beautiful way, representing sovereignty, you know? So everyone seeing that argument, clash and debate of the two movements is enough to educate everyone on what freedom actually is and what side stands for freedom and what side stands to try remove it, you know? This to me is very important, right? So land ownership, everything, that's what it's all about. Colonized people want their land back. But Marxism was a scam. And for anybody who's new to my work around that, I've done a good video on YouTube, just put in Marxism is British foreign policy, right? And that's why the Balfour Declaration was financed by Zionism, but the Israeli Declaration of Independence was the most Marxist-inspired document on planet Earth today. And it's about taking land off people, taking rights off people. And the Palestinian people are an example of what happens when you do that. And they're just trying to unfold this everywhere. And that's why you've all these socialist NGOs. That's what they're really for, you know. So the Communist Manifesto as well, there's probably people new to this topic, so I'm just going to go through it, right? Karl Marx was a British agent. 5 years before writing the Communist Manifesto, he married into the Prussian aristocracy, right? So his family were proper elite in Britain, right? And the World Economic Forum today is the British and Prussian aristocracy who have always controlled Europe, right? They just manipulate it and change it around and all that kind of stuff, you know? Even when you look at, let's say, when people talk about communism, Marxism, they usually talk about Bolshevism and in Russia, right? So Leon Trotsky was an MI6 agent. He was ran by the British Empire, and what they'd done is they wanted to destabilize Russia, because that's what Marxism is really good at doing, right? Destabilize Russia, but it was also they wanted to get rid of the Tsar, and because he was after signing contracts with Iran he was after signing contracts with the British and Iran over the control of Iranian oil, right? So the moment the Bolsheviks took control of Russia, MI6 agent, British agent Leon Trotsky, the first thing he done was remove Russia from all those British and Iranian oil contracts. And what he done was he handed over free control of the whole drilling rights and oil rights of Iran to the British Empire, the largest transfer of wealth in human history to that point. So for anyone that would say to me, oh, Bolshevism is anti-imperialism, no, they're the most imperialist thing on the planet. That's what it is, right? And that's why it gets deep in Ireland too as well, right? So Bolshevism, they took control of Iran's oil, and that was the start of British Petroleum. If anyone wants to look into it, that's where it came from this exact what we're talking about, right? Now, obviously it gets a lot deeper than that, and you can look at today in Iran, what's happening in Iran, and who stopped the oil through the Hormuz Strait or whatever it's called. It was insurance companies in London who still control it from Bolshevism. Right, just to give people an idea, right?
So we're getting into, I'm just gonna because you've thrown so much information out there, but there's something I need to clarify in my head, right? This is going to seem a little bit sort of off the cuff, and right, which came first? Because you spoke about Zionism, okay? Which came first, the Marxist or the Jew? Who was using who?
The Jew came first, and the Marxists came after.
Right, and
right.
who controls who now? And is one using the methods of the other, or is it a partnership, so to speak? Or Zionism and Marxism, are the two completely separate entities, or are they symbiotic?
They're symbiotic. Zionism is the end goal of what Marxism achieves. So Marxism is only, let's say, a tool in order to get somewhere. It's a system. It's not. It's actually not an end goal, and that's the interesting argument I have with Marxists. Right? They're on about the equality of this. No, Marxism is only there to break down a society to take full control of it. They have no government structures after it. Absolutely not. They have nothing that outlines the leadership of it. Nothing. It's just full take control where people become slaves. So like how it starts is Marxism. First, you have the promise of liberation, right? So that's where socialist, communist ideology to mobilize mass support from workers, peasants, and intellectuals, right? Then that instantly goes to, and this is where we are now in Ireland, revolutionary propaganda, which is equality, democracy, and anti-imperialism. That's the way they make it look like. Then the moment they have that, it goes to power consolidation, where rivals are eliminated, one-party rule and a dictatorship is established, right? And that's an authoritarian shift. The state controls the economy, media, military, and uses ideology and propaganda to justify repossession and the removal of rights, right? In effect, the language of socialism and communism are only propaganda designed to create centralized authority rule, even though the original ideas were about liberation and equality. In this scenario, they get populations to remove their sovereignty, property rights, and individual rights. It's the perfect system of control. It's the perfect system of control. So like you spoke there about Zionism as well, right? And I'd like to touch on this topic, right? So there's different types of Zionism. There's political Zionism and there's biblical Zionism, right? They're very different. But where did even biblical Zionism originate? See, I'm a weirdo. I read everything. Since a child, I realized, coming from the family of Wolfe Tone, I don't trust the education system one bit. My nan taught me, do not trust it. They're not your friend, right? They're the enemy. They're here to try remove your soul from you, all of that sort of stuff. I was educated on that from a young age. So straight away, I'm asking questions about things. So where Zionism was first written down was in the Jewish Bible, right? Zion, it means a hill. It means a hill upon which kings are sworn in and all that kind of stuff. Leadership, sovereignty, all that kind of stuff, a hill, right? And that goes back to the King James. The King James Bible is when it really kicked into power. And if you remember then, the King James Bible was basically where they divided Christianity and weaponized Catholics against Protestants. The King James Bible was the dividing of Christianity. It happened a bit before it, but the King James Bible is what enshrined it, right? So like what they needed to do is at that point, they weaponized Catholics and they weaponized Protestants. And from that point on, they weren't spiritual, they were essence of governance, right? Essence of governance, and then they were weaponized and turned against each other. And that dividing of Christianity is what created Zionism. From that point on, Israel became the Holy Land, but before that, it was actually Ireland. And that's why land of saints and scholars, all of that. So for some reason, they had to come here, manipulate Ireland and divide Christianity, right? They had to divide Christianity to weaken it so we could be controlled externally through different empires and stuff like that. So even like I talked to a lot of people about before that, we had an early form of Christianity too as well. And in early Christianity, that was Catholics and Protestants were part of Christianity. And an argument I would always have, but it's the United Irishman and me, like a Catholic area going down and attacking a Protestant area. How can you call yourself Christian when you're attacking Christians? How can you do that, right? So like the United Irishmen, they weren't just about uniting Catholics and Protestants. It was about uniting the whole of Christianity. Right? I'm about that too. No matter what your belief is in this planet, no matter what your spiritual belief is, no matter what your religion, it's very important to unite Christianity for the safety of the world. Right? Fully. The United Irishmen also believe that. So Catholic, Protestant, dissenter, and they'd also you had a lot more that was all respected, right? And they wanted to get rid of the Holy Roman Empire from Ireland, get rid of the whole lot, so we could have our own system of governance, right? And our own without external manipulation, right? And that's what I love. That's what republic actually is, you know. So today we don't have a republic because you've all that Michael Collins and De Valera nonsense, is what I call it, right? So that's political. That's a political republic because we don't have control of our own laws. It's not a republic. Yeah, and even Michael, no matter what people think about Michael Collins, he swore an oath to a foreign king. He swore an oath to a foreign king, and that was part of the Free State Constitution, right? So, like, I'm bred to have problems with Eamon de Valera, and I've big problems. And even just to give you an idea, I might have said it before, even my nan educated me on a lot of this. And I was told from a young age about one of the saddest days in my family's history, right? It was actually the day Eamon de Valera died, right? So the day Eamon de Valera died, they weren't sad because he died, but I'll explain why they were sad. So they all met up in a house in Crumlin in Dublin, right? And all my family, they all met and they went into the house, closed all the curtains and turned off the telly and remained completely in silence for a whole day, and didn't want to acknowledge life or the world for that day. They didn't want to do that because they didn't want to look out the window and see people paying respects to the man that destroyed Ireland's education system, Eamon de Valera. Absolutely destroyed it, and they knew that what was going to happen was the minds of generations of Irish people are going to be absolutely ruined and weaponized and souls taken away from them and all that. And that's the education system. And I was taught about that before I went to school. You know, so I went through school then. Like when I was in school, to be honest, questions I was having in school is which teacher is a Freemason, which teacher is one of the Knights of Columbanus, and the Knights of Columbanus are a Catholic Freemasonry as well that nobody really talks about. So these were questions I was having, and I didn't believe anything that was wrote in the history books, not one bit of it. So this is very important to me, right? And there's another part that I want to talk about as well. Like, if you have any questions, please jump in, right? Please jump in. But the Marxist thing as well, right? And we can go into very deep levels of it, right? I've always been into Irish mythology, Irish folklore, all the stories, and these stories were designed to teach kids how to overcome problems. And I'm going to give you one topic of it that will explain a lot of today's world, right? So there was a battle called the Battle of Moytora, the Second Battle of Moytora. And this was a battle between the Tuatha Danann and the Fomorians, right? So the Tuatha Danann wanted a creative race, a race in control of their own creative mind, spirituality, all of that, right? So they had the freedom to create whatever world they wanted, all of this kind of stuff, right? And honor the land as well. So you also, on the other side, you had the Fomorians. So the Fomorians wanted a slave race. They wanted a race of humans that have no ability to control their own brain, their own mind, and they would only ever be used as energetic slaves, basically harvested, kind of nearly like the Matrix in a way. And part of the Matrix, I would argue, is nearly like the Battle of Moytora, right? So Irish mythological history, there's a cycle of it, and I believe this cycle is coming back. Like we'd have the spring, summer, autumn, winter, the cycles of life. They believe the cycle of consciousness. That's where you'd stone circles and all that kind of stuff, monitoring all different kind of stuff, right? But the Fomorians and the Tuatha Danann was a battle for control of DNA, human DNA. The Tuatha Danann didn't want to touch. They believed that this divinity is to be honored, worshipped, all of that. But the Fomorians wanted to edit human DNA, manipulate genes, manipulate DNA, the whole lot. And they want, like eugenics, they wanted just a controlled slave race. And I believe the Battle of Moytora is happening in the world today, right? Like when you look at COVID, when you look at all of that gene editing, transhumanism, that's Fomorian. That's the Fomorian. So for me, educating this, like if I was to educate a child and teach them about the Fomorians, they would get it quicker than any concept of COVID. And if I tell them that's who they are, 100% every essence in their being will say no. No. So
why aren't the Fomorians? Yeah, why aren't the Fomorians? Okay, so I like mythology as well. I like the stories you like, and I know most of them. I only found out about the Fomorians, I'd say about 3 years ago, I knew who the two of the Danann were, and I know our pantheon of gods, but up until about 3 years ago, I had never ever heard of this evil god structure we had. It seems to have disappeared from. But I know all the other mythology, and there was books in our library in school. Yeah,
it was hidden from you, and it has taken a long time to bring this back. And even I couldn't talk about anything like this growing up, And then it becomes even interesting. Like, do you know who the leader of the Fomorians is?
I don't.
Balor of the Evil Eye. Right? Kind of makes sense.
Are we?
Yeah. Balor of the Evil Eye. So when you see it in music and all of that, like, to me, that's I can diagnose all that straight away. You know what I mean? And that's the problem we're in life at the moment. But the two of them won that battle. They won that battle. So again, that's what I mean. Like, even people get downtrodden by looking at social media, this, that, the other. No. We do it properly. Let's say we do it. Let's say a protest, a free Palestine from Marxism, whatever mean name it has to start with, right? And a celebration of sovereignty. That's what you want. A celebration is what you want, like getting people involved in all of that, celebrating. And we look at look at Northern Ireland, right? And you look at, let's say, even the Orange Order parades and how they have the big flags and banners and stuff. Nearly even something like that. Just a celebration of who we are. What's your clan's name? What's your family's name? Celebrate the whole lot of it. You know what I mean? This is very important, right? And I can get into when it comes to, let's say, conspiracies, this, that, the other. Like, that's why I need to slowly bring it back, even with Balor of the Evil Eye, because what I say to people, it takes a couple of days for them to for it to really set in. And I have people coming to me now who went to school with me going, shit, Jar, fuck, man, you've been on about this since childhood, But again, that's why I really love and admire all things to do with the United Irishmen. These were very important people, right? And that's what republicanism is. Like, when we get to 1920, that's when to me, Michael Collins and Eamon de Valera were part of the destruction of the Republic, And again, that's why we spoke as well before about Terence MacSweeney, all of the above. Like, that's what I love. Sovereignty is very important to me, extremely important. I can go into all different understandings of the land, but sometimes I can totally freak people out. And like, people are realizing today, Ireland was run for a long time even by the the Knights Templar and all that kind of stuff. Our government is really, we've a scam government. Mm-hmm. They're only pretending to be a government. We don't have a government really, right? That's just
we're a client state. We've been a client state.
We're a client state. We're a client state. We're a vassal client state, whatever, right? But even a lot of people would look at, let's say they look at Knights Templar and stuff like that, and then they would talk about something like the Baphomet. And the Baphomet would be like a ghost that they say they worship and all of this kind of stuff, right? Just to put that into perspective, last week in Ireland, you had in Killorglin and Kerry, you had a ceremony called the Puck Fair, where a goat is raised up over the town and a goat is sworn in as King of Ireland. Right? That's the Baphomet, just to put things into perspective, right? So that ceremony, believe it or not, was created by the same people who wrote the King James Bible, right? Francis Bacon, all these kind of people, they're who created the Puck Fair. And that's why it's the oldest festival in Ireland, whatever. And it's recognised by the sovereignty of the world. Now, if you go down to the Puck Fair, it's the symbolism and masonry. You can see how people get brainwashed easy. It's there in front of them. Like, I can show people how these symbols and stuff communicate with your subconscious mind, whatever, all that kind of stuff, right? But the Puck Fair, my question was all the time, I used to always wonder what happened to the goat afterwards. Like, then the goat marries a 13-year-old virgin. Do you know what I mean? The goat marries a 13-year-old virgin in Killorglin, and this happened last week, right? And I've often wondered what happens to the goat, right? And you can never find out. But like, if these psychopathic kings, false kings of the world, they believe that you kill a king, you become a king. Like, is that goat sacrificed? I'd say he probably is. I would probably 95% I'd bet on that goat is ritualistically sacrificed as a king of Ireland being sacrificed. And that's probably mental for a lot of people to hear first. But when you think about it for a moment, it makes a bit of sense, right? Unfortunately. And yeah, any question?
Yeah, you've blown my mind. You did this to me the last time we spoke as well.
I know. I
So
look.
So okay, we'll talk about the puck fair for a while. So now that you've said it out loud, right? I now can see the symbolism. I've never actually physically been to puck fair in my life, but
Yeah.
I've seen the goat hoisted, and without you actually saying it out loud, it would never have entered my head that this is nothing only an old Irish tradition, hunting the wren type thing. Okay, so does everything boil down to just a battle between good and evil? Is it as simple as that? That it is just literally...
I actually believe so. I'm at a point where I believe so. I believe so, yeah. And I believe it's not even about good and bad. It's about those who have control of their own mind and those who don't. I believe if you don't have control of your own mind, then you're just like it's like as if your soul is gone and you just become a remote control car from that point on. And I believe that's the enemy. The enemy is the remote control car, right? And there has always been a history of people trying to enslave and manipulate people, and it's always been there. And they've all, like, the programming has just increased. But I do believe that, and that's why I believe it's always important. Like when we do eventually, let's say, achieve sovereignty and all of that, that's why it needs to be respected too, as well. You know, morally respected too, as well. And things like Brehon law, what an amazing law! What an amazing like what I know I've spoken about dark stuff, but I'm spoken about dark stuff to give you an idea of the beauty of Ireland. There's a reason they've done all this in Ireland. There's a reason. There's a reason they tried to do everything they fucking could to try wipe out the Irish nation and Irish people, but they couldn't. They couldn't. They couldn't. We wrecked the heads of the most powerful people in the world, right? But what I'm saying is Ireland is a very important place, right? I've had this conversation, sit down with chiefs of tribes from all over the world, right? And it's interesting. I've always known about Ireland, lands of saints and scholars. I've seen things in Ireland that many people wouldn't get an opportunity to see, right? But like they've all explained to me as well, before Israel, it was Ireland. Ireland taught them. Ireland taught a whole lot of them, right? So, but Ireland had a decentralized system as well. The Brehon law was never a government structure, never anything like that. It was owned by the people of Ireland. And we need to bring this back as people. And so that's what I kind of work with these indigenous nations, learning and stuff. And I want to bring back our indigenous structures. We're not asking the government, we're doing our own thing, right? Doing our own thing. But I'll get into that in another.
I'll give you a good example of why Brehon law was fantastic, and it proves what you just said there. The king was, or the chieftain was subject to Brehon law more so than anybody. The leader actually suffered for Brehon law, i.e., if a king or a chieftain had a blemish on his face, it was a bad omen and it could lead to a bad harvest. So the people would remove that king or chieftain and put somebody else in his place who was more suitable. But that's kind of an analogy of, it wasn't just physical appearance, it was how you carried yourself. It was everything. You literally were a servant to the people. Okay, you had all the trappings of, you probably got the best food, and you had people to do things for you, etc., etc., etc. But you stepped out of line, you were gone. That was it. It was as simple as that. And like I said, even to your physical appearance and your opinions. And if you broke Brehon law, if you made a judgment that the people deemed was a poor judgment, you were gone. They would push you out beyond the ninth wave for something so heinous. I've read some very, very good books on Brehon law, and as a people, and this goes back to sovereignty and personal responsibility, which I agree with you 100% on what you're saying. We need to do this locally, as in we need to start holding those who are hurting us to account locally, in whatever way suits the community, so to speak. It can be boycott, it can be ostracization, it can be far worse than that. But when and why did we lose our ability to hold those who would claim to be our masters accountable? When did we give that away? Is there a specific time? Is it?
There is, like, right, so there is a specific date, specific time when they said tanistry and Brehon law was abolished, and that was in the 1600s, right? And it was abolished by English law, but that was just before the King James Bible and the Battle of the Boyne and all of that, right? And you have to realise too, the Battle of the Boyne was a weapon on consciousness in Ireland, right? That's basically what it was, right? During these times as well, let's say you talk about the famine in Ireland, right? The genocide famine, whatever way you want to look upon that, right? People had nothing, they were starving, whatever. But if you go to the Cove Cathedral and the biggest cathedrals in Ireland, they were all built in the 1750s, all of them. So what, you're telling me that there was people starving, but yet there was the biggest buildings that we can no longer build were built at the same time, right? So I see the Battle of the Boyne, all of that, that was all to get rid of, they wanted to hide and get rid of what was before, and let's say nearly start from date blank. And that's where there has been an attack so much on Irish heritage, Irish history, all of that. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know. Because even if you think of it, right, I said the word Zion from biblical construct, from the oldest thing in the Bible, it just means a hill upon which kings were sworn in and all of that. Technically, we had that before Israel ever was created. It was called the Hill of Tara. Mm-hmm. It was called the Hill of Tara. Later on, then all this Zionism stuff only then became Israel and all the insanity. But that's what it goes back to. It goes back to just a hill where kings were sworn in and they were seen as divine righted kings and stuff. So we had that in Ireland long before all these Bibles and all these different things. Now there's one other problem that is also important to talk about, right? So in Ireland, they talk about, let's say, we moved from paganism to Christian, right? Truth be told, there was never paganism. Paganism didn't exist, right? And I'll explain that. And people would see me and they're like, oh, he's big into druids. He must be into all this paganism stuff. Let me explain that. The word pagan comes from paganus, meaning country bum, right? Country bum. That's what the Romans called us when they came here destroying the whole place. Country bums, right? And then paganism was associated with all this nonsense, but it was educated from afar, right? Truth be told, we've no idea what we had beforehand. We don't know. We only know through mythology, Brehon law, all of this kind of stuff, right? And then unfortunately, on top of that, you had the same people who wrote the Bible and stuff, they were all involved in creating what eventually became Wicca and all that kind of stuff, created by Gerald Gardner and Aleister Crowley and all of that. Because people who were interested in this land sovereignty, they had to manipulate it to make it look like witchcraft, right? So now you have a scenario where I have my biggest arguments against all these lunatics who walk around Stonehenge wearing curtains, you know? They're wearing curtains claiming to be priests and stuff. No. That has nothing. Don't you dare respect old Ireland, right? They claim to be Druids, but Druidism was just a language. It was like they created the Irish language, and that's like an alphabet in itself, a teaching. That's all that was. So I show them and they realize, shit, they know nothing. And I'm saying, look, everything that you're doing now is based on Jewish mythology, right? Based on all the Book of Enoch and all this kind of stuff and the dark aspects of it all. You're nothing but a Jewish Wiccan, you know? And they're like, when the penny drops, they're like, shit, like they have nothing. Stonehenge is the capital of insanity. That's where all the bullshit is, right? Even when it comes to Ireland and stuff, you know, let's say, but don't get me wrong, like, I believe that I'm not trying to, there's genuinely amazing people who would be seen as pagan as well. And they would just love the land so much. They would see the teaching of God in absolutely everything. So I'm not shitting on your belief. I believe before early Christianity, we must have had some serious version of sovereignty. Now, I was talking to someone today, right? We had a serious, like, even if you look at Brehon law, you look at, even when we talk about faith is the placebo part of the brain, right? I can take a drug, it has fucking nothing in it, but my belief that this drug can heal me has the ability to change my physiology and heal me and all of that. So your faith is very important. And that's why I believe it's important to have faith in something. faith is important. Faith is important, right? And in Ireland, all the rivers were named after goddesses and all this sort of stuff, right? It doesn't mean that they believed the river was a goddess, but you might as well worship it as such, because then you're having a placebo effect on your environment and everyone around us, right? Imagine that. That's why you couldn't disrespect Brehon Law. It was into that level, right? And we know through even round towers and stuff, were round towers built in early Christianity? I don't know. There is no records of building them. I've tried a lot, but what I can tell you is those round towers are made of certain quartz and different stuff that it improves the fertility of the soil 4 times. So you can grow things 4 times quicker. So it was all about fertility, right? Fertility of soil. But I believe that was cultural. It was a cultural tradition, and we based all our societies on this now, right? You know, even when it comes to, let's say, I'm going to talk a small bit about the Bible, right? And again, like I've read all these scriptures. I've read everything. I just read the whole lot of them, right? And that's why I'm the best person to argue with. I love it. I look forward to it because I pull on stuff that people can't, and that's fine. So again, I cannot agree with the King James Bible. That's just me. I'm not shitting on anyone who does, right? Because the King James Bible to me was used to divide Ireland, right? Systematically. So divide Christianity, good luck. No matter what your belief is, I don't want to divide anyone's belief structures, right? I'm not into that, right? So like, I was talking to a guy only this morning, and he's looking at writing a Bible in old Irish script writing, right?
Wow. Okay.
So now
there's a task.
Yeah. No, this is the interesting part. Like in Ireland as well, it's all based on interpretation, right? The interpretation of words and all of that. Words in Irish language have a totally different meaning. If you don't believe me, go down to the fucking street sign out at the end of the road. In Irish language, it'll mean something poetic. In English language, it means nothing. So words have a completely different meaning, right? Completely different meaning. Even we talked about kingship before, right? Truth be told, there's no word K in the Irish alphabet. None, right? We didn't have kings. We had an Ard Ri. Yes, Ard means high person, but Ri does not mean king. It does not mean king. It's like the enlightened person, this intelligence, right? So like, we are meaning that when you look at Brehon Law, when you look at what you said about kings are held to the right, what we call kings have to serve their people, meaning that by spirit, our spirit is totally against Marxism and communism. The communism and Marxism goes against Brehon Law, goes against everything. So I'm all about the land, I'm all about all of it, and it goes against everything. Like, so that's not acceptable on any level, and that's total imperialism, right?
How would Wolfe Tone have known at the time the dangers of Marxism, would say in its essence, in its creation? How did they see, you know, your written word is limited? Was there influence at that time, as in what was Marxist ideology starting to infiltrate and starting to spread around? And what happened
is, yeah, so what happened was it started 50 years before the Communist Manifesto in London, and that was the Gracchus Babeuf was the conspiracy of equals, right?
Tell me about this guy. Tell me about this guy, Gracchus.
Gracchus Babeuf, he was the leader of the conspiracy of equals, right? He was arrested by Wolfe Tone, and he eventually got his head chopped off. That's what happened to him. That's what happened to him at the end, right? But what happened is, because they pushed it in a certain way they were trying to undermine the French Revolution, right? So you had a lot of, and that was about getting rid of imperialism and all that. So you had a scenario where you had also kings and imperialism were against the French Revolution, as you can only imagine. So then they were looking at this going, wait there, what if we make them fool them into thinking that they're going to become free, and we just bring them back under imperialism anyway, which is technically what Marxism is, because you're not left know who's in control of Marxism. It's just equality, but everyone's slave to a fucking monarch is an equal, really, if you think about it, right? But Wolfe Tone was interesting too, as well. In like he grew up in Westmeath, so what we're talking about with that was very much part of his life too, as well. Old Irish teachings, all of that. He was inspired by Brehon Law, and that's why he went and became a lawyer. He studied law afterwards, you know. And it was then when he was studying law, he realised, right, needs to get rid of the Holy Roman Empire from Ireland, right? And that was United Irishmen, all that kind of stuff. When he was in France as well, like, I haven't got access to this myself. I've had access to very interesting things that a lot of people wouldn't have got access to. So when Napoleon took control of Rome, and they had access to all the Vatican archives, so Wolfe Tone had access to these archives too as well. So he would have learned a lot through that. And that's why when he learned as well about the Holy Roman Empire and the legal construct in Ireland and all that kind of stuff, all of that. So that's what he was learned. That's what he was learning from. There's another part of it too as well that's important to talk about that I would have always been very aware of, right? Many people wouldn't know this, and it's important to talk about. When the United Irishmen swore an oath to protect Ireland at all costs, right? And upon swearing that oath, they realised the most important way to protect Ireland is to infiltrate foreign governments. And that's where you had, back in those days, you had Irishmen popping up around the world, as leaders of different armies, different things. They were United Irishmen. But Wolfe Tone also realised you're going to have to infiltrate the highest ranks of the Knights Templar and Freemasonry. And that's what Wolfe Tone done. Someone had to, right? Someone had to. So that's where he got in contact with the Knights Templar. That's why Knights Templar supported Wolfe Tone, because they also wanted, let's say, to unite Christianity away from the empire too as well, which was all the Magna Carta stuff. So that's what they supported, United Irishmen. And even ships that came from France, yes, a lot of it was financed by the French Directory. The rest were financed by the Knights Templar. And the main chairman of the United Irishmen was a member of the Knights Templar, one of the butlers of Ormond who rebelled against his own family. So they had interesting contacts, and also because they were uniting the Holy Roman Empire, they're uniting Christendom against the empire, which Christians want anyway. All of the above, they were a major threat to the empire, And at the time as well, you had, let's say, proud British people, but they were anti-royalist. They wanted a republic for the British. They all supported United Irishmen. So you had so much of the British Army getting involved, and that's why it became such a major threat. And that's why there was such a crackdown on him. So even Wolfe Tone, we're told that he killed himself. He was murdered. Wolfe Tone was murdered. My grandmother has educated me on this from a young age. Same with all the Tone family. They still fight for the justice of Theobald Wolfe Tone. You see, what happened is, first of all, he was chief de brigade of the French army and adjutant general of the French Directory. You can't just kill a man like that. You cannot just kill a man. There's all different... you can't. There's all act of war, all that kind of stuff. They didn't want to make a martyr out of the founder of Irish republicanism either. The cat's probably kind of wants to look in. Right? They didn't want to make it. Yeah, they did. That's her cat. It's not mine. You get out of it now. Right? Out of it. Right down, you grand. They didn't want to make a martyr out of the founder of Irish republicanism. Right? So they had to make it look as if he killed himself. And at the time as well, it was a sin if you killed yourself. It was seen as an act against God, right? And by doing that, then you couldn't be buried in any grave. They didn't want to allow him buried in any grave because they didn't want commemorations and stuff. They didn't want anything. They didn't want even the church recognizing him, because if you think of it, he undermined the whole church, right? So they didn't want a place where he could, like, the only place in the whole of Ireland he could be buried was a family farmhouse. Because they weren't left nowhere. There was such a law and crackdown against Wolfe Tone. They didn't want anybody seeing what that man had just done, So that's why he was buried too in unconsecrated ground. And with any bit of luck, I'll probably try to get buried there myself as well, somewhere, Even if it's in a corner, I don't mind. I'd be happy, no bother. But that was the power of Theobald Wolfe Tone, Look, don't get me wrong, he's only human too as well, But
bring all this into the now. Bring all this into the present. Okay, so what one could say that we've lost. Marxism is everywhere. It's in everything. How do you start pulling out the vines?
for me personally at the moment, I would like a chess move and create a free Palestine from Marxism movement in Ireland. The reason I would do that, because how could a system respond to that? Instantly, you're going to get people talking like, what? There's two solutions? You see how Palestine is absolutely everywhere. Absolutely fucking everywhere. You know what I mean? So how could they be seen to stop something like that, right? And for me, it's education is what's important. Like, I won't be doing any digital ID. I won't be doing anything like that. I am myself, you know, even like just during COVID and stuff, there was always a way. There was always a way. And there will always be a way. I fully believe that, right? Are we the generation to experience change? I don't know, but we're the ones that are always going to help it along, right? I refer back to the statue here, look, of the National Monument in the Grand Parade in Cork, and how the four different guardians, that represents all the generations who have always been fighting for Irish freedom, right? But Marxism doesn't want you to know about the sovereignty context, you know? And again, there is no such thing as Republican socialism. It doesn't exist. And like,
can I throw something at you?
Yeah.
Okay. No, because again, you know, I speak to lots of different people with lots of different ideas. I would speak to people who would represent themselves as a socialist Republican, not a Republican socialist. They're two different things. And depending on your interpretation of the words, everything that we do as a society is technically a form of socialism. Having healthcare is technically a form of socialism. Totally. That's not Marxism. That's not communism. It's basically, even back when we had our tuas and it was all just clans, there was socialism. The fool or the person who couldn't work or whatever, they weren't allowed to starve to death. Somebody took the burden of responsibility on, and you know, you always have to have a safety net for those.
Yeah, 100%.
And that, in its very essence, is, I don't have another word for it. There might be another word for it. You could just call it responsibility. You can call it having morals, but it's socialism in concept.
Yeah.
But it's taking out all of the control elements. It's taking out all of the negative. All you're doing is what is the right thing to do. We're looking after people who just need a bit of a hand. The Marxists will claim, well, that's all they're doing. You know what I mean? They just want everybody to have a free house. They just want everybody.
Thank you very much for asking that fantastic question first, right? That is a very important question, and I have some of my biggest arguments with people over this as well, you know, especially when you look at James Connolly, when you look at, and like, the funny thing is, Wolfe Tone had the conspiracy of equals arrested, the whole lot of them, but he was not technically fully against socialism. Just in the wrong hands, it's tyranny. But it has to be in the right hands. And even James Connolly believed that himself as well. James Connolly always said that, like, without sovereignty and in national independence, social change is irrelevant and a waste of time. So that's like that again. That's what I say, and that's why James Connolly signed the thing supporting sovereignty. He didn't sign the document supporting Marxism. He realized that too. He realized, fair enough, because the lads, they're like, Terence McSweeney, all these people, they were all going on the basis of Wolfe Tone and all the men who stood up for sovereignty. So James Connolly was educated on this. What I'm telling you now, James Connolly was educated on also. And what did James Connolly do? Shit, lads, let's get behind sovereignty. And that's why he signed the 1916 proclamation. So what I tell people is, like, yes, we want to look after elderly people. Totally. Like, Brehon Law has an amazing way of actually doing this, right? But without all these change you're heading toward, without like Wolfe Tone argued that collectivism in the wrong hands is a tyranny, right? James Connolly also argued that without national independence and sovereignty, it's a complete waste of time. I'm sharing the same message as them. I'm sharing that exact message, right? So, like, first we need control of sovereignty. We need our own power. Then we can sit down and have that great chat. No problem. So I'm not against, like, this is the mad part that I have with socialism. I'm not saying that your conversation is irrelevant. I'm not saying that. It's very important, right? It's very important. I also argue with a lot of socialists, and they find it very hard to come back at me. They talk about, like, I talk about socialism and stuff. They talk about socialism. Then I talk about Brehon law. Right? I talk about Brehon law and aspects of Brehon law. And do you know what they said to me? Wasn't that meant to be the purest form of socialism? And I'm like, there's an argument for that. I get the argument you have, right? Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So I get the argument that they have. Brehon law was very different, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely very different. But I believe a lot of their love for what they perceive socialism to be comes from a genetic memory of Brehon law. That's my argument.
One of my favorite terms, genetic memory. We might have discussed this before the last time we spoke. Is that why you do what you do and why I do what I do? That is just... It is in. I know my people are old. I've no famous famous people that people that have been, well, one or two maybe in Galway that have been written about in recent times, but there's nobody of note, so to speak. But we can trace our people back a long time. We're old people, and we're all island people as well. Mother's and father's side of the family, from islands off Galway and islands off Donegal. So it's very easy for me to sit here and go, I know what I'm doing is right. And I know having this conversation with you is the right thing to do. I've no doubts in my mind whatsoever. And there's loads of ideologies and there's loads of different... what I find frustrates me the most is the people who say that I have all the answers and my way is right.
Yeah.
I've seen, since we first spoke, I've seen your videos. I've looked back at your other stuff. I've seen your conversations with tribal leaders from other parts of the planet. I've watched the discussions. I've watched you plant an oak tree up the country with another man. I've watched. You've never just went, I'm right. You're throwing ideas out there. You're having conversation. You're teaching history, and the biggest thing is you are reaching over the aisle, because we have this big, massive left-right debate. You're reaching over that aisle to say, come have conversation and come have debate and come have. You know what I mean? Break bread with me. And it's absolutely fantastic. Why aren't more people doing it?
Scared.
Of what?
Scared.
Of what? Yeah, but of what? Of being wrong? There's nothing wrong with being wrong. There's nothing wrong with somebody out debating you, or it forces you to become better and hone your skill, and you know what I mean? We're not supposed to win every single argument, like.
No, so a lot of people are scared, I think, and people will come to me and say, I wish I had the balls that you have to just go out and say it. Like, I'll openly, what I'm saying now, I openly say that directly to Republican socialist organizations too, and when I pull them on their type of socialism, is it Marxism, socialism, they say, no, we're Connolly, we go back to Connolly and Connolly's form of socialism. But I'm like, yeah, but you say that, but in reality, you're just Marxist. So you're not doing that. You're not doing that. Like, you wouldn't be doing that if you believed fully in James Connolly. But a lot of people are scared. Like, you look at the Marxist woke nonsense, like, you know what I mean? Like social engineering, all of the above. Like, people are scared. I'm definitely not. Not at all, Look, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things too that I would like to even talk about here, but it's very touchy subject. Sometimes, like, even back in the day, I was part of starting the water protests, all of that sort of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I really got into it deep. And don't get me wrong, very successful and all that. And it looked really good to the public. They were all like, oh, sure, you're amazing, you're this, that, the other, whatever. But in my own life then, outside of that, it was chaotic as the whole world were turning against me. You know what I mean? And then I'm going around the place. I was being followed by MI6 at one point, which is just fucking mental. Like, I'm only normal, whatever, right? I was having all these problems. Like, one day I was walking down the road and I was stopped by a leader of the, let's just call it the Cats, not giving up either. I was stopped by a leader of let's just call it an Irish Republican organization. And he came to me, he said, Gerard, I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but you need to be very careful. You're being followed right now by MI6. What? I was like, are you for real? So you're trying to tell me now that James Bond is following me? He said, that's exactly what I'm telling you, Gerard. You need to be very careful,
You want to be careful as well, because that cat is going to knock the sword down on top of you.
Thank you for that. So I said, where is he? He said, walk with me. Well, I walked down the road a bit with him. And then I turned around and he said, there he is looking in the window. There was a businessman with a suitcase. He just looked like a proper businessman. Mm-hmm. And then I walked on another bit and then turned again and I seen that he was after moving. And it's only then that your brain goes, there's actually someone following you, Joe. This is beyond bananas. So I pulled out my phone and ran at him. And he just vanished. Look, he's trained at getting away from all that kind of stuff. But why I was being followed was not what people think. It's not that I'm some militant threat or anything like that. At the time, during the water protests, I was changing the programming of the people of Ireland. Mm-hmm. And you have gatekeepers of this programming. Like, people have this idea when it comes to MI6, intelligence services, whatever, James Bond is running around the rooftop with a gun and stuff. In reality, they're in pubs in Ireland chatting to people, making sure that the programming is going through. And I was upsetting the programming. So, like, I pulled courts on licensing. I was doing all that kind of stuff. Like, you know, even it's funny, I'll show you my old, I had to take a couple of videos down when I was in the fines office and I pulled the court and fines office and licensing and all that. I'll explain that in a sec. But very funny, what I called and this was back in 2012 or something like that, what I called my YouTube channel when I was pulling the course on licensing was Equality Cork, because I knew where it was all going. But it was very funny as this was all launching in Ireland, and this is when the Cork City Councils were launching all their equality platforms. When Annie put in Equality Cork, there's a video of me pulling the court on licensing and all that kind of stuff. I went into the fines office of the district court at one point, and I had a fine, you know. And I said to the woman, I said, look, is this where I pay my fine? She said, of course, this is the fines office. This is where everybody pays their fine. I said, oh, great, thank you. I said, is it okay if I pay cash? She said, yeah, definitely. Provided you have cash, we've no problem paying. I said, cool. I said, on Irish business transaction law, I'm required to see licensing before I give anybody any money. I said, if I go into a pub and the pub doesn't have a license, then I can't give them money. It's actually legal for me to give them money. So I'm in a place of law here at the moment. So I have to uphold law, you know. And can I see your license just to make sure you have the ability to accept money? And I knew that the circuit court, the circuit court and the district court were not mentioned in the Constitution. It's only High Court and Supreme Court. So their legislative courts is very different, right? They're the political courts, whatever. And she said, no problem. She said, nobody has ever asked me this before. She said, I don't even know where to go, but I completely respect your question. She said, do you mind if I go and have a look for it? I said, no problem, no problem. So she went, like, this all live on camera. And then she came back 15 minutes later and she said, sorry, we can't seem to find the licensing at the moment. Can you come back another day? And I said, look, I can't. I'm a busy man. I'm here trying to pay. I said, there's a camera looking at me here in the corner. I can pull footage of this proving that I'm here trying to pay. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to pay. I can't pay, so I don't know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to have to leave. I said, hopefully it'll figure itself out. And your mum was in shock. And I said, look, thank you for your time. You know, I was being nice about it. And when I walked outside the door of the fines office, all the hairs in my body stood up. And when I walked on the corridor, all the judges were on the corridor looking at me. Who the fuck has just been in pulling the place and license in? So then, but I didn't do anything wrong. I was asking a genuine question.
Yeah. And
then if you know Cork, I went out the door of Anglesey Street, the courthouse, and went straight across the road into the Garda headquarters and reported it. So I'm up at the counter and showed it to the Gardaí, and he was like, I showed him my complaint, and he was like, all right, what do you want to do? I said, look, I've just come from the court there and pulled them all on license, and then they couldn't show me, so I don't know where to go from here, but I have to report it up to you. If they couldn't show a license, I have to be an upstanding member of citizen of Ireland. He just started laughing. He couldn't believe what was happening, but he was really nice about it too, you know. So it was a funny story, but I ended up getting money out of court anyway. I ended up getting 145 quid for taking time out of my day and going into court, whatever.
You got unfined.
It ended up being fine in the end. So I'll tell you my argument, right? And it's funny for people listening, but that's why I need to be very careful. I was talking about this in 2012, and I was changing the programming of everybody because this was all going live on YouTube. I used to stop at Garda checkpoints and ask them questions. I loved it. I used to look forward to it. I was driving down the road one day and I was stopped by the guards. They were checking tax and insurance, all of the above, and I had tax and insurance, but he said, you have a bit of a ball there. I'm going to have to give you a fine for that. I said, cool. I said, it's fine, so is it? He said, what do you mean? I said, you said it's fine, so it must be okay, right? He said, no, you can't be changing around words to suit yourself. I said, look, if that's the case, so you can't be changing around words to suit yourself either. He said, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? I said, look, law is based on a thing called jurisdiction, right? Juris means law. That's where we get the word jury. Diction means of words, and that's where we get the word dictionary. So law is therefore defined as what the words mean in the dictionary, right? He was like, of course, how else would law work? We have to base it on words. I said, exactly. I said, in the dictionary, the word fine means no problem happened. You're telling me it means something, but like, who told you that fine means something problem happened? And I said, sorry, it gets a bit more stranger than this. I said, we have a political party in Ireland called Fine Gael, right? And all our judges, they were in government at the time. I said, all our judges were politically appointed by Fine Gael. So you know as a member of Gardaí trying to tell me that we have a criminal judicial system in Ireland, and you as a member of Gardaí trying to bring the judicial system of Ireland into disrepute, and if you aren't pleased with that, right, no. Anyway, it was like he stood there and his head was spinning, but like, how do I put it? So since that date, you no longer get a fine in the road traffic stop, you get a fixed charge penalty notice.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing was changed. They just changed the wording. And that's what I see. And at the time I was like, do you know something? I'm going to change something here in Ireland. This is really good. I thought I was challenging it in a nice way, whatever, but they just changed the word and it continues on, right? And that's fine. I've learned my way of doing it. So I got a check and I'm here down at the Bank of Ireland, going in to cash the check. And I got the check on the 10th of the 11th of the 11th. I cashed it at 11 minutes past 11 on the 11, which was funny when the whole world was meditating. Here I am inside in the bank cashing a check, right? And the woman goes, where'd you get that? I was explaining it to her. And she was like, I have to call someone here. So she called them, the bank managers, and all, they're all behind the counter, and I had to explain it all to them because they were wondering what is going on here. And then she said to me, look, she said, I don't know what you're after doing, but she said, we don't have a system to be able to put this through. We have to accept it. It's signed by the fucking superintendent of the Gardaí. But we have no system because it never happened before. She said, do you mind if I give you a photocopy of that check as a receipt? I said, no bother, no problem whatsoever. Once you give me the money, to me, this was just get the money and leave. And I did. I kept that as a receipt. I'll send it on to you there in a minute. And left anyway. But like, again, it's the part. I'm not that person attacking courts anymore. I believe attacking court is how you energize the system and all of that kind of stuff. I have a different viewpoint on it. That's why I wouldn't be supporting a lot of the people just standing there saying, I'm sovereign, I don't recognize you and all of that. I get what they're saying, but if you don't recognize the court, what are you doing in the court? And with what I know too as well, like, people could get away with going with, like, I'm basically like nearly like a solicitor or law barrister or something. But then you could get a scenario where I could be on YouTube and I don't know who I'm teaching, and I don't want people to be going around with weapons and getting away with stuff in Ireland. I still believe in honor and morals and stuff. So that's me. Yeah. So that's what happened with the fine anyway.
I'd agree with you in your stance there for a different reason. I think that those trying to help Ireland through the court system is just constantly showing the courts our hand. And what you said there, they just change the language.
Yeah.
Or they just bring in new legislation, or they bring in new statutes. So I respect the work. I respect the work rate. I don't see it as being beneficial. Here's one for you. On sovereignty, I'm sovereign. It's as simple as that.
Good.
I just
good. Of course you are.
I'm also a law-abiding citizen. I don't break the law. I don't. So therefore, I cannot be summoned.
I get that.
And that's how I deal with it. I cannot be summoned. I am a man. I cannot be summoned.
And I look at a lot of people, and obviously I was a wrong lad for a long time. I had my own law school in Ballybehan. Lawful Legal Loophole Law School, I called it at the time. And then I had people coming and they were learning about a lot of stuff. And at the time as well, I'd even Gardaí turning up because they were being stopped as well by the speed check vans and stuff, And we were looking at the civil discourse and all that kind of stuff and teaching people different ways. And then what happened is it evolved, and then obviously the water protest happened. And then we brought that straight into a civil dispute. And that's why you had in Toker as well, in Ashbrook Heights in Toker, we had Gardaí, because they seen everything, all the T's were crossed, the I's were dots, all that kind of stuff. And the Gardaí then escorted Irish Water onto a housing estate in Ashbrook Heights in Toker, and they got them to remove water meters, and then that was live on news at 6 o'clock, and then the next day the Irish Water protest started, right? But again, back to the point about the legal thing, and why I've had conversations with Gardaí who stopped me on the street as well, and they said, "Ger, we're not against what you're doing. Like, you have to understand, you're not pointing the finger at anybody. We get where you're coming from. We get you're using it as a system to educate and teach people." But they said, "But sure, the arguments that you have given us, it's going to take at least 20 years to solve them. Like, the arguments that you've given, like, you know what I mean?" And so, like, I've went through that process, and I realize it, like, it's not for me. And also, like, I look at some people and they're on about sovereignty, this, that, and the other. I believe it's a psyop to make you think that that's what sovereignty is. But what I'm talking about with the land and stuff is actually true sovereignty, right? So let's say when people go into court and all the paperwork, this, that, the other, right? And then they're being brought into court then every couple of weeks. Like, you've no freedom. You've given away your freedom. You've given away your freedom. Now it's in your life, you know, and you have to prove that's no way to be living. That's not free. That's not fucking sovereignty. Sovereignty. How is that fucking sovereignty when you've just given away your freedom, right? Yeah. And so that's my position on that. Don't get me wrong. I still love listening to people and hearing people and all of that. And I have a really good insight in it. But then that's because I come from the Tone family too. I'm no different. I'm no different. I'd imagine being Wolfe Tone, like sitting in Paris there, and the Vatican archives come in the door, trailers, loads of them, like. I can see myself going, "Fuck yeah, give me that there, lad. What? Lads, get the lads in Ireland ready there, right? Ships ready, where's the Knights Templar? Right, how many boats can you give me there?" I would be that guy. Do you know what I mean? I would be that guy. So I understand law, and I understand it from, I totally understand it from a legal perspective, as in, like say, when we talk about Bibles, you talk about all this, the other, and people don't realize the Holy Roman Empire, like, you go into court, you swear on a Bible, right? It's still church law in a way, you know what I mean? Holy Roman Empire, all that kind of stuff. But we also have Brehon law, you also have Tanistry, you also have laws of nature, you know, and Brehon law would be very much part of laws of nature. And the way I would see stone circles now, like, again, some people think they're ritual sites and stuff like that. I don't. I believe that was the pagan nonsense. But I'm not shitting on people who are genuine with the pagan stuff. There's a genuine essence to the land. It's just that word I have problems with, right? Because all the connotations and stuff. And a lot of people don't give a shit, but that word really annoys me, right? But these, let's say, sacred sites, right? Stone circles, all that kind of stuff, right? I'll talk about Drumbeg for a moment, right? So I believe these are places where you went for solace, you know? And they balance ecosystems. They serve a purpose too as well. But when you go there, you sit down and you just connect with natural law. That's it. You watch something. It's like the original projector, you know, and you're just watching stuff. And it's like, we all live in nonsense, right? We all live in nonsense, this, that, the other. But I can go to Drumbeg, and I've often sat there and slept in the middle of it. Like, you know what I mean? Panned out there, no problem. And it's like a therapy, connecting back into natural law, and you could say God's law, you know, and you understand the underlying intelligence of life itself. And to me, that's therapeutic. And I come back into the world then, the insanity world, but I come back with a better essence of myself, a better sovereignty in myself. And I believe sovereignty, like, the more you embrace and love nature and life, it grows in you. This love grows in you, you know, and that's what I'm all about, you know, and I share this with the indigenous nations of the world too as well. And I'm going to just tap into one bit that I haven't talked about you yet. You might have heard me talk about it, but again, I'm only just going to tap into it a tiny bit here now, right? Like, we can talk about Om, where you have an Om stone, and then you have a language, you have a line, this kind of thing. Catch that to this and turn it to a side. It's the origins of the language of music. Om. It's all about sound. Sound is therapeutic, and that's what we say, your sound, his sound. Sound is important, right? So we look at if we talk about the land, and we talk about, let's say, land sovereignty, Ériu. So you look at the shape of Ireland, right? Some people say it's in the shape of a bear. Some people say it's in the shape of an embryo, the embryo of life. And that's how the indigenous tribes of the world would see it, right? The embryo of life. Whatever happens in Ireland, we're connected by all the rivers, the 4 rivers of the world connect everywhere. Whatever happens in Ireland sends a ripple effect of consciousness through frequency around the planet. That's why it's all about controlling Ireland. And that's why all the indigenous nations of the world came to Ireland to support sovereignty and what I'm talking about. So they will all, like I'm onto the Chiefs, they will straight away be out free Palestine from Marxism. Of course they will, but it's something we can unite with a lot of them straight away on, right? Anyway, I hate using the topic chakra system, but for just to get beginning, I would say use that. But I'd be gone from it then as well because I'm not into that at all, right? So like, let's say you look at Ireland, the base, the point where energy rises, primal, that's Cork. The city of Cork is all based on primal energy if you go back into the day, right? I would understand the whole area of Cork very well when it comes to it's all primal energy, rebel instinct, survival instinct, all of that, right? And the war of Cork is very much, I can see why they mythologicalized it and all of that. And that's why we specifically went to Dripsy Castle when we brought all the indigenous elders of Ireland to Cork, because the waters of Cork go to Dripsy Castle before going to Gugambara, right? And you've all mythology around the area. But it was the castle, the last seat of Cormac McCarthy, who was the last chieftain under Brehon law and under the Gaelic order. And that was a place of sovereignty and all that kind of stuff. So we went there on his land, and that's where we had the meeting, whatever. But it's all about primal energy, right? You've West Cork, which is the feet, where it's all grounded. I feel so relaxed in West Cork. It's so lovely down here. You can get into Cork and Kerry, Skellig Michael. I can get into that another time, the importance of it. It's all grounded. You have the Burren in Clare, which is what people would call the solar plexus, right? In the chakra system. But we have a very different system. This system came from Ireland and then went to India. And that's where they got it from, this understanding, right? So the Burren has different flora and fauna. That's gut microbiome, gut, all that kind of stuff. Also, outside of that, you have the Aran Islands, and that's all about sun coming up and all the symbolism as well. Because it's all about kind of solar plexusy stuff, right? The Loch Derg is where you have Holy Island and all these incredibly ancient, like the land, that's where the land of saints and scholars come from, that area. That was seen as the womb. That was seen as the womb, right? The birth of it all and stuff like that, right? Now, to get into it deeply, Belfast is the subconscious mind. That's why it's been fighting with itself all along. The deep subconscious is Armagh, right? And in Armagh, you have St. Bridget's buried, Columba's buried, and St. Patrick's buried, because they're part of the consciousness of the land, right? They're deeply part of the consciousness of the land. You look at, let's say, Derry Dira is Irish, means oak. So this was crown, but not crown as in C-R-O-W-N, crown as in C-R-A-N-N. The Irish word for tree-head or spiritually seen as a higher state of consciousness or whatever. If you look at Donegal, right? Donegal will be seen as kind of what people will call the pineal gland and stuff like that. Again, I don't like using the chakra system. It's about hormones, glands, all of that kind of stuff. Donegal was the most least vaccinated place in Ireland. If you look at them, they're all very holy, very spiritual people. Daniel O'Donnell was nearly like an Irish Jesus at one point. You had people in the houses with the elderly people with all cups and everything of them, right? And I see there's a guy from Northern Ireland. He's around really doing the whole nationalist thing at the moment. I can't remember, Saul Nahiran or something like that.
Oh, Saul Nahiran, yeah.
He's from Donegal, right?
I can't remember. His name won't come to me. I know him. Oh, I'm having a break. He's a good guy. He's doing great work.
He's great. But again, I'm just emphasizing he's from Donegal, right?
Yeah.
So the Dublin's where we're caught, right? The bum is Waterford, right? And colonization goes back to the colon, by hook or by crook. That's where we were colonized or raped from first, right? It's really interesting when you look at the spirit of the land like that, and that's how ancient societies in Ireland seen it, right? Remember that thing in Drumshanbo? Mm-hmm. Drumshanbo, the Misha Era festival, right? So that was at the Throat. That was Leitrim from Anna area. That was the Throat, right? That's also where Bobby Sands was from. So the spirit of that area is all about trying to get your voice heard, right? Trying to get out. And then it eventually went to the hands of Ireland, which is Mayo, which is Castlebar, and obviously Stephen done his job up there. But mythologically speaking, that's like, shut up. It's like a punch from the spirit of the land if you look at it from the teachings of mythology, right? And that's how I do look at it. I do look at it like that. You can even, Northern Ireland, that's why they kind of chop the head, and that sectarian means to divide the terrain, the hemispheres of the brain. So that's why I would look at that, and that's why we're even looking at now next of having all the indigenous leaders of the world, and there'll be even more of them next time. We're planning on trying to get to Belfast, into the subconscious mind, into South Armagh. So that's why South Armagh as well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But looking at Ireland like that, what I mean is like the spirit of the land is very real, and we have been educated to keep away from that. That's all empires have all done. That's where they try to get rid of our Irish language, because it's based in nature. Every letter from the native Irish alphabet derives from the name of a native tree, and it's all about the meaning and harmonics of nature. Because if you're going to have a language, you might as well have that language part of nature, part of natural law, right? And that respects everybody, right? So the spirit of the land, that's literally how I see it. And we have an old martial art called Shrivaha, and that's, to me, that's what all the points of the body are about, right? There's a part, I don't know if you understand Tai Chi or Kung Fu, there's a part of your body called the Dantian. The Dantian is below your belly button. It's Dantian. And in martial arts, that's seen as where you bring energy from the outside world in and heal your inner spirit and all that kind of stuff. In Irish language, Dantian means two-headed Donnan. I'm not telling you that part of your body is two-headed Donnan, but they respect this part of your body as part of the mythologies of that and how you connect to your ancestral realm, right? So at these points around Ireland, you connect with those parts of your body and the land and all that kind of stuff. And that was part of ancient Irish martial arts. And I've had this talk with one of the heads of the Shaolin Temple, Master Sang, who is the family who inherited 5,000 wisdom of Chen-style Tai Chi. So when I was at the Loch, and as part of, I don't know if I showed it yet, as part of when the water protest was happening, I understood the spirit of the land, right? I was like, how can I bring the spirit of the land in with us? And I got everybody surrounding the Loch in Cork holding hands. And it was based on consciousness and uniting people, creating a collective consciousness of people based around water, based on ancient teachings of Ireland. And instantly the water protest just took off. You know?
You're not the first person I've asked this question to. How old are we?
I don't know.
But we are older than they'll allow us to know.
We're much older. And that's why the interesting part, and the part that I'm interested in, and yes, we talk about Celtic Christianity, right? And but before that is what interests me most. And we only really have, let's say, we've stone circles, we've all this, that, the other, and we have mythology and all of that, and Brehon law, and we really realize that how intelligent, the intelligence that we come from. We come from vast intelligence, like a people who live their life based on nearly the mycology of soil, the intelligence of soil. Like, wow, like that is the most amazing thing on the planet, right? And that speaks to my soul every day. You know, I walk around the road and I feel blessed with Ireland and the spirit of the land and stuff. And interestingly enough, like I've lived a life where, yeah, fair enough, I've been very ballsy for a lot of it, but this land has protected me. I can openly say that. And when I go anywhere, I'm protected. There is no problem. Right? And none whatsoever. And I believe too as well, like, look, you can look at, people talk about, let's say, you could talk about fairy folklore in Ireland, whatever, right? But like, when you get into the depths of it, they were not spirits of a different planet, they're spirits of the land, right? You can look at, let's say you look at a fairy fort at the moment. Nobody will drive over that, or nobody will build a road on that or anything, because our subconscious knows that the land itself is sovereign. The land itself actually holds power, right? So, and it can affect you if you affect it. And that those fairy forts would just be a small glimpse of what Ireland used to be a long time ago. And that's why we're down now to 2% DNA of native Irish woodlands. And I'm all about bringing all that back, right? But I've had experiences in life where the land itself has been nearly communicating with me and helping me along the way. And I find it very hard to experience that, but I feel it's true. And like if I go to somewhere, I feel safe. It's like as if there is spirits of the land, they're going, fair play, Joe, thank you. You know, we got your back too. And what I'm saying is, like, imagine if a whole nation got behind this, and that's what this is about. So what I'm saying is that meant something to all these people too. If they personified Ériu and the spirit of the land, that's how much it meant to them. You know, I'm just someone who has experienced this a small bit in my life. You know, what happens when big collectives of people do it? And again, I was only tapping into this when I got people to surround the lock holding hands. You know, and it was nothing but the most beautiful thing ever. At the lock, I seen people crying from happiness. You know, just they couldn't believe that they were actually experiencing something like this. You know, and yeah, I just see it as the way forward, and I see this as a cultural thing, really. Like I see it as a cultural thing, right?
Yeah, definitely. Now I'm gonna cut across because I'm conscious of time, and because so we're gonna have to do part 2, because we didn't hit on half the stuff I wanted to talk about. Yeah, I want to go more in depth into the cultural. I talked to you about this before. We might do maybe a couple of 30-minute ones or something like that if you're up for it, and do it in an episodic format. Because there's so much knowledge there. It's hard to condense it and we'll say pack it into just an hour and a half conversation. And I'm always conscious of people's time. I ask an awful lot of people to commit to an hour and a half of conversation, but we might have a chat again about doing the small little episodic snippets and just fire them out there and people can watch them in their own time and kind of in smaller bites. We need to talk about the hunting. We need to talk about the bows. We need to talk about the
even just finding swords at the beach.
Yeah. That there's an episode. Yeah, there's an episode in that in itself. And also, I have a colleague who is brings people out into Quaker Island in the middle of Loughree. It's a beautiful place, absolutely beautiful history. It actually ties into some of what you were talking about in relation to the buildings that were there. They were literally photocopying stations while the world was falling into darkness. All of the information came to Ireland and was copied, and there was a whole city on the tiny little island, and it was literally just photocopying information. These monks just sat isolated on their own for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours, trying to preserve all of the old things they don't let us see and don't let us know about. It's fantastic. So look, hopefully we'll get that off the ground. I'm going to let you go. I'm just going to play a little outro. I won't lie. I'm watching the clock as well. I need to be on the road at 5:30 in the morning because I'm getting
fair enough. Yeah. But thanks for your time. And I really enjoyed the conversation too as well, right? There is a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we'll definitely look, if you have the time and can commit to it, we'll definitely do an episodic, just to break it down into smaller bite-size pieces, and put a name on the thing, and look, this 20 minutes is about this, 20 minutes, because the knowledge there is absolutely fantastic. You know what I mean, and the ideas, and it aligns with what everybody is feeling, and everybody knows.
Yeah, no, I get
you know
that.
What I mean, but everybody's just. Some people are just caught in their little cliques and their little cults and their little ideas, and everybody's got a little bit of I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And you don't have that. It's a case of it's just a case of you're throwing the knowledge out there and the information out there, and you're bringing in positive energy from outside the country, which I think is really, really important. I think having those tribal leaders on our land is bringing positive energy into Ireland. I think it's really, really, really important, and it fixes a lot of problems, and it opens up an awful lot more conversation in relation to, we'll say, sovereignty issues, race issues, people who do belong here, people who don't belong here, etc.
Totally.
We'll flesh that out over time. Gerard, thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to play an outro. Just stay down there for a second. I'll say good luck to you properly. That was fantastic. And just follow Gerard's Facebook page, because he posts so much information in relation to some of the stuff we touched on. Like I said, we didn't go into it in an awful lot of detail. Thank you very, very much for watching. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be able to do those small little bite-sized episodes, and we can actually go into things in an awful lot more detail. Thank you very much for watching.